I want to take a moment before we even begin this morning to consider our reality. I don't want to be the doom and gloom guy, but I've been having a really hard time sitting in this world and ignoring the heaviness surrounding us what feels like every minute. Another week of chaos, of heartbreak, of loss. Another week of political figures twisting scripture to wrap the eternal kingdom of heaven within the temporary reign of nationalism. Another week of death from a pandemic, from catastrophic weather, from our inability to recognize that we are all human beings and that each of us is cursed within this broken world full of corrupt systems. How many times have we scrolled past a murder on any number of devices and just keep scrolling? We are numb to it. We're numb to everything. Problems such as these are complicated and convoluted, and it's never be able to clear the brush from our path on this side of eternity. But we can try. We can love. We can seek to understand and grow and develop empathy for each other. We can realize that this whole thing is so much bigger than us because this whole thing is God's. And God cannot be swept up into our politics. God cannot be swept up into our meager attempts to hold on to self-righteousness. God cannot be swept up in a hurricane because God controls the wind. God moves the mountains. God is bigger than all of this, but for some reason we still seem to think that we have the answers. I'll admit that I know that I know nothing. I still get swept up in the pursuit of being right, of changing minds instead of hearts. I get preoccupied with that. I get preoccupied with talking instead of listening. Join me right now in taking a minute to listen to the cries of our neighbors, to the things that we do not understand, to God. Isaiah 40, verse 25 and on. To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see, who created these? He who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God. Have you not heard? Have you not known? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. The word of the Lord. And we have endurance because we cannot remove our gaze from God, personified through Jesus, and nothing else. We cannot properly season the world around us and be the salt and light that we're called to be if we lose sight of that. If we are caught up in the temptation of the systems of man, which will always fall, then we will fall. But we fix our eyes on our Creator, who is greater than anything else, everyone else, everything. He is greater than.
name. The galaxies lay perfect in their place. They remain unmoved, lest you should tell them to. My King is greater than all else, I confess. My King is greater than the name above all names. My King is greater than all others, I confess. My King is greater than the name above all names. Kingdoms fall and nations rage. Your whisper bends all time and space. Your love suspends our petty disbelief. Our quarrel cease. Mountains crumble, cower low. The swelling waves lay silent at your sway and fall ashore. The desert melts away. My King is greater than all others, I confess. My King is greater than the name above all names. My King is greater than all others, I confess. My King is greater than the name above all names. My King is greater than all others, I confess. My King is greater than the name above all names. My King is greater than all others, I confess. My King is greater than the name above all names. Greater than all other names. Greater than all
Have you ever stumbled? I do it all the time. I could be walking on a smooth sidewalk and there'd be a blade of grass and I would find it and stumble. My whole life has been one stumbling thing after another. I'm really kind of amazed that I've never broken anything through stumbling. It's easy to do. So easy. You know, the New Testament uses the word stumble in our scripture text this morning. And when we hear it, we most often think about tripping, falling flat on our face. But actually, this term means so much more than that. Now, the word here for stumble that we're going to be read is actually the word scandazolo. Scandazolo. Can you hear the word scandalized in it? Scandanzalo, yeah. And it literally means that, to scandalize, to offend, to ensnare, to trap. Literally, the trap stick. You know what I mean by the trap stick? Making a deadfall trap. That's usually what we call a scandalon. The animal knocks it down and the rock comes right on it. Or in this case, a bear steps on the bear trap and bam, it's done. You see, it is just not a block of wood that you trip over, but a scandalon is specifically used to entrap something. And it literally means to stumble, to bait, to snare. Have you ever been entrapped? Have you ever been ensnared? Have you ever been entangled? My college roommate and I would often pull pranks on the folks on our floor in my dorm room. And one day, someone decided to pull a prank on us, and they webbed our room. Have you ever seen a spider web room? What they literally do is they take balls of string, and they tie them around every little artifact from place to place in the room. You can literally not even walk through it without knocking down half the stuff that's set up in your room. You couldn't move in our room. You couldn't get past the doorway even. And to even trigger one of those strings meant there was just going to be a lot of noise and a lot of broken stuff. And you couldn't move without imperiling something. And that's what Jesus has in mind here when we read Mark chapter 9, verse 42 and following. Hear the word of the Lord in Mark 9, verse 42. Now, if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you to have a great millstone which was tied around your neck and be thrown into the sea. Verse 43. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than to have two hands and to go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better for you to enter into life lame than to have 2 feet than to be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out. It is better for you to enter into the kingdom of God with one eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into hell, where their worm never dies and the fire is never quenched. Amen? Y'all are sick people if you're amen in that, man. I never got to say the word hell so often in a sermon before, you know? So, obviously, Jesus is talking in what we call hyperbole. That is extreme great exaggeration. But before our literalists get out there and start plucking out their eyes and cutting off their hands and their feet, or any other appendage that might get them in serious trouble with their faith, we need to understand what Jesus is talking about here is most specifically talking about doing a sin that might entrap, ensnare, entangle another life that keeps them from the kingdom of God. Now, our world doesn't treat sin seriously anymore. Matter of fact, if we were to talk about it, it'd be something really in the past. Instead of calling it sin, we call it making a mistake, an error of judgment. a choice, and because I wasn't raised in the appropriate environment and didn't have the appropriate resources, I chose wrong. Oh, it's an accident. And the worst thing is, what used to be seen as a sin is now acceptable behavior. And worse to the point, if you try to call that simple behavior out, you're considered judgmental, prejudiced, and the next thing you know, you got a series of lawsuits coming at you. We have a culture that is all about being a stumbling block, causing people to stumble. And it's horrific. It's horrific on circumstances, it's horrific on relationships, it's horrific on individuals in our culture. Someone once asked a preacher and said, you know, you say unsaved people carry a huge burden, the weight of sin. And the gentleman says, I don't feel anything. How heavy is a sin? Is it 10 pounds? Is it 80 pounds? Is it whatever? And the preacher replied by asking, if I laid a 400-pound weight on a corpse, would they feel the weight? Would they feel the load? And the gentleman says, well, of course not. The person's dead. They're not going to feel a thing. And the preacher then replied, the spirit too is indeed dead, which does not feel the load of sin and is indifferent to its burden or flippant about its presence. You see, I think we've lost our understanding of the burden of sin in our world. St. Augustine once wrote, sin is believing the lie that you are self-created, self-dependent, and self-sustained. I'll repeat it. Sin is believing the lie that you are self-created, self-dependent, and self-sustained. And the problem is what happens is because of sin, we become incarcerated into ourselves, not realizing there's a whole nother world out there that God calls us to enjoy in faith and in love with God. We have become so myopic with our own way, doing what we want to do because it feels good, that we have served the evil trinity of me, myself, and I, instead of getting caught up in the overwhelming trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We create, in a lot of ways, our own hell, our own separation from God. Jesus was trying to teach us that we should not help people get into hell. That's basically what he's saying. Don't help others enjoy their separation from God. And the worst thing that can happen is we might even lead them there. And that's what hell is. Hell is total separation from God. One pastor says it does little good to preach about hellfire and brimstone to a congregation that's filled with people who don't believe there's a chance in hell they're going to end up there. And that's part of our problem. We don't think about the reality of separation. It reminds me of Mark Twain's famous statement. He said that when he died, he would like to go to heaven for the climate, but he would prefer to hang out with the people in hell for the companionship. Sounds clever, sounds witty, but what we need to understand is sin, even though it seems fun, it's not fun because it ultimately creates barriers between humanity and others. It creates barriers between me and God, and it ultimately even creates a barrier within me, with myself. Sin is hell. It's separation. It's serious business. Now, what's interesting to me is when we hear the word hell in the New Testament, they actually use the Greek word Gehenna. And Gehenna can be found in the valley of Hinnom, just outside of the southwest walls of the old city of Jerusalem. It literally was a town dump, a town garbage heap. It was a lot of times on fire. You see, hell is the place which God has reserved in his infinite mercy for those who wish to ignore him and not relate with him. He is not going to force us to enjoy a relationship with him. Consequently, when the time comes, he's not going to force us to have an eternal relationship with him either. It is all a choice. You see, we don't have to take Jesus' words seriously or literally here, or I should say, we don't have to take Jesus' words literally here, but they're very, very serious. Remember what Paul says in Romans: the wages of sin is what? Death. Death. And if it's not physical death in the body, then it's definitely then spiritual death of the soul. And who needs to preach about hell hereafter when we all have the prospect of enjoying it here? We all discover now that we're cremated equal. I'll let you think about that. Cremated equally, we all are. Still, the concept of separation from God has great, great meaning and great, great trial. The famous German theologian Karl Barth, who actually taught and preached here in America as well, had a deep feeling regarding a dream he had one time. And that dream really disturbed him. According to one of his friends named Eberhard Busch, Barth said, "I was dreaming that a voice asked me, 'Would you like to see hell?' And Barth said, 'Yeah, I'm interested. I'd like to go once.' And then a window opened before him in his dream, and he saw an immense desert. It was very cold, not very hot, but very cold. And in this desert, there was only one person sitting, very alone. Barth was overwhelmed with depression by the loneliness that person felt in his dream. And when the window was closed, the voice said to him, 'And that threatens you?' And Barth said, 'There are people who say I have forgotten this region, and I have not forgotten. I know more about it than others do because I know of this. Therefore, I must speak Christ. I cannot speak about Christ enough.'" What's Barth saying? Barth's saying in his own life he felt that alienation. And the idea of it being an eternal alienation just blew him away. Blew him away. So the challenge Jesus gives us is don't entrap or make people stumble. And unfortunately, we live in a world that often does that. So let's examine it for a moment. I'm going to invite you in your small groups to deal with the questions. What are ways we Christians make people stumble or entrap from God? And the next question we're going to look at is, what are the ways the world or our culture makes people stumble or entrap from God? Take some time to discuss. we have this thing with culture and this thing being manipulated and created by the evil one to move everything and anything away from having a contact connection with God. And a lot of times you can see it in modern day society just becoming farther and farther away. We can see it in media. We can see it in groups of people who try to control and utilize their political power or whatever to hold back folks that are trying to live the good faith life. And you and I are going to continuously be in conflict with some things that the world thinks is okay. And when that happens, guess what we're called to be like? Salt. It is salt. It's salty. This particular rock of salt actually comes from one of the Morton salt mines underneath Lake Erie. A friend of mine gave it to me years back. And Morton salt refines salt, don't they? And that salt's used for a whole bunch of different things. For example, it can be utilized as seasoning. It can be a de-icer on the sidewalk or on the road. It can make one thirsty. It can create healing. Have you ever gargled with salt water? Feels good when you got a sore throat. It can be used as a preservative to make things last. And it's interesting to me that right after Jesus says all this stuff about hell and hellfire in our text, and Gehenna, the fiery garbage hill in Jerusalem, he says hellfire is serious regarding sin and how it impacts us. But now in the text, Jesus transitions the conversation to another type of fire. But what's interesting to me is fire's fire, isn't it? Doesn't it all burn? Right? No matter how it's used, one way or another, it still burns. But here's the difference between hellfire and refining fire. Hellfire is total destruction. It creates separation from God, and that's what sin does. Whereas refining fire burns away the stuff that keeps us from enjoying a larger, growing relationship with God and a growing witness. A refining fire still burns, but it's a purifier. And it makes us stronger, makes us better, and brings us closer to God. And it refines the sin and the rebellion in each one of us, out of us, daily as we let that refining fire take place so that we can relate with God closer and stronger. Listen to what Jesus says in Mark chapter 9, verse 49. For everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good. But if salt has lost its saltiness, how can you season with it? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. You see, you and I have a choice. We can either be ensnared or entrapped or entangled in this world and enjoy the fire of hell, or you can be salted by the fire of faith through Jesus Christ and escape hell and actually be refined with fire. Now, this particular text connects and refers back to Malachi chapter 2, verses 2 through 3. Listen to what Malachi has written. But who can endure the day of his coming and stand when he appears? It's referring to the coming of Christ, all right? For he is like a refiner's fire, like a fuller's soap. He will sit as the refiner and the purifier of silver, and he will purify the descendants of Levi and present offerings to the Lord in righteousness. You see, when you and I decide to follow Jesus, we don't stay the same. If you've stayed the same from the moment that you have received the Lord in your life, you've got a big problem. Jesus wants to purify us so we can become saltier and saltier in our faith. Jesus tells us salt's good, isn't it? Can you imagine French fries without salt, whether you got high blood pressure or not? Just doesn't work. We are called to be filled with the joy of God. We are called to be filled with the celebration so that we can party like Jesus partied with the sinner. We are called to being so in love with God that people see the love that we have with God, that they begin to love God because of how we love God. That's seasoning. But unfortunately, I've run into too many Christians who, instead of using salt for their season, they've used dill pickle, and they'll make you all pucker up. Who wants to hang around with folks like that? Be all sour. You see, you and I are supposed to be seasoned for Jesus. Look at how you can spice up people's life in the kingdom and draw them into it so that they do not become entrapped, ensnared, and entangled in this craziness around us that we call the world. So, salt does a couple of things. It's a seasoner, which we talked about, but it is also a de-icer. It is a de-icer that melts, I hope, the contentiousness of our culture with Christ's love. It is a place where we basically can have the opportunity to be one who becomes the bridge between these various conflicting pieces. Folks, this world is full of hazards, and we've got to protect people from them, and we've got to help them to keep from slipping. So often that means we have got to become the bridge between two opposing forces and voices so that they can see each other beyond their politics, beyond their philosophy, and become the bridge that allows them to hear one another. We've got to thaw out this cold world we're standing in regarding the left, the right, the Democrat, the Republican, all that craziness. We live in a world where relationships are frozen. I have seen people totally disregard our family over an inheritance. Is that just stupid or what? Money is never more important than the relationship. I have seen people make freezing decisions about others based on race, economy, gender, or whatever prejudice they can dream up. And we are called to be those people that bring the thaw onto that and help people feel included in the midst of the touch of God. And most importantly, we have to be the people that help others see the image of God in other people, rather than castigate them and throw them out. Jesus calls us to embrace rather than reject. We are called to love and not hate, and we are called to encourage, not necessarily tear someone down from limb for limb. Now, salt also makes us thirsty. After every Chinese meal I eat, I'm parched. I think it has to do with monosodium glutamate or whatever they call it. Jiminy crickets, it makes me thirsty. The question I want to ask you is, how are you being a thirst quencher to someone who's thirsty for something more in this life? There's an old saying that Pastor Ed Matejko says all the time. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? And then he says this, unless you add salt to the oats. Then the horse is going to want to drink, right? Sometimes the only salt to the oats that someone's going to encounter is you. So be the salt that makes someone thirsty. And not only is salt good for a thirst quencher, salt is also good for healing. If you study history, you will find Christians going everywhere there is disease, hurt, pain, suffering, dying. Mother Teresa, what did she spend her whole life doing in Calcutta? Helping people die so they're not alone, so they encounter the good word of God. Do you remember when the Ebola crisis first broke out in the late 90s? The only reason it didn't run rampant was because of some American Baptist missionaries who saw it happening, quarantined it, and studied it, and passed the words on to other people. It's because they were there. and they were willing to help, even though it might threaten them. History teaches over and over again that if we ignore or abandon people who are dying or left them wallow in a bed of pain, there's nothing going to be but brokenness. You see, Christians understood Jesus was a healer, a man of hospitality, and they began to create hospitals. Why do you think hospital and hospitality sound so similar? All hospitals were for the longest time was a place to help someone feel like they were accepted in the midst of the greatest pain of their life. So if you look around, you would be astounded how many healing centers are alive and well in the midst of this world because of Christians who believe Jesus could heal. And we are called to do the same thing. Heal the mind, heal the sick, heal those that might be broken because of whatever social thing that ever happened to them, and help them encounter the healing of the Lord. Well, salt is not only just good for healing, but it's also good for preservation. If you cure a ham with salt, what do you get? A Virginia ham, which is worth like 20 times more than a regular ham, right? But what's the good news about that ham? It won't spoil. It's a ham that can pretty much last indefinitely. And if you can stand its saltiness, it's even interesting to eat with eggs. You know, George Gallup, that famous pollster, writes that fewer than 10% of Americans are deeply committed Christians. These are people who are a breed apart. They're more tolerant of people with diverse backgrounds. They're more involved with charitable activities. They're more involved in practical Christianity. They are absolutely committed to prayer. And they are far more happier than the rest of the population. Then he goes on to say that such devout Christians exert an influence in our society that far outweighs our numbers. How are you at being a preserver? Do you preserve the love of God and the message of God around you? Just like salt, it only takes a little bit to enhance the flavor. It does the whole job. Jesus didn't say we were the sugar of the earth, did he? We share wonderful properties with salt. You see, we live in a world that entraps and snares and entangles us away from who God is and how to live with God and live with each other. And for those of us who uncover the truth of Jesus and Jesus' kingdom, the worst thing we can do is take away our saltiness and its influence upon people around us and keep them being ensnared, entangled. Consequently, we're called to live a whole nother way. What's interesting to me in this world is Jesus' truth keeps disappearing more and more. And the only way to begin to understand the truth of God in this world is only by following and studying the truth, the life, the way, Jesus. And the truth is, this world makes more people stumble from God to hell than anywhere else that I've seen in the last 60 years that I've kind of been looking at it. Jesus makes the people of the world stumble from hell and sin into the arms of our loving Father. As Michael Card writes, he says this: Jesus will be the truth that will offend them one and all, a stone that makes men stumble and a rock that makes them fall. Many will be broken so that he can make them whole, and many will be crushed and lose their own soul. Along the path of life there lies a stubborn scandalon, and all who come this way must be offended. To some he is a barrier, to others he's the way, for all should know the scandal of believing Isn't that where we are? Believing is scandalizing in our world. And we are called to follow the one who makes the world trip in its evil ways. And if we are salty, we will point to Jesus in the way we live, act, and love. Now I'm going to invite you to deal with another question.
service because we want to have the time that you need and take the time that is needed to go to God in prayer. And when I was thinking about what to do today with the prayer time, and maybe no one will answer, but I'm going to ask the question, because if you don't ask the question, you never know. But I was just curious, and what I would like to do rather than run around with the microphone and have, just if you could stand and take your mask off just long enough and speak really loudly, that would save a little bit of time than going around. But I'm curious if any of you can or would be willing to share what makes your prayer life positive. You know, like if you were trying to explain to somebody about prayer and what that means to you or how you do it, could you explain it? Is there something that really works for you? Some people might say, well, I have to pray in the morning. That would not be me. Getting out of the bed is the worst thing I do all day, so morning's not my prayer time. And it took me years to learn, though, that that's okay. You know, that you can, because God wants us to pray unceasingly. So I can pray later in the day. But does anybody have anything you would like to share? Linda. Can you do me a favor? Stand, please, and stand and talk real loud.
When I pray, I'm fine. Tears come down my eyes.
Anyone else?
When I pray, I'm with this person that makes me feel safe. Safe is my God. And I can let it all out. I can just pour out whatever. And I know even if I'm angry, he understands, he accepts it, he doesn't judge me for it. And I constantly know that he loves you while I'm speaking through him. And then when I'm sitting silent, it's always a peaceful silence. And I need that so much in my life.
I think we all do. I mean, I think sometimes that's maybe even part of a challenge in a prayer time is that we want to, you know, we've got our what my mom used to call it, and I've heard other people refer to it, but vending machine list. God, I need to do this, I need to do that, and then I like to order that, and I like to have that, and if you could, you know, have them put that, add that to the vending machine next week, that'd be really great. And, you know, and we've got our lists of, you know, things that we want and need, and we just want to push the buttons, you know, and we don't then take that time to just and listen to him and let him speak to our spirit and lead us. Were you going to say something?
Well, one thing my dad's always told me is that when you talk to God, talk to him like he's sitting next to you and talk to him like he's your friend, and that always helps me.
Very good.
Very good.
Yes, Tim.
I want to say we live in a society that, in a way, where Christianity can become a liturgical thing. And so our prayers can tend to become liturgical things. And it's not like what he said then, where you're just talking to your best friend. And keeping that out of our prayer, that it gets so liturgical that we miss the point of we're just talking to our best friend. And I'll tell you one other little thing with me. Sometimes my strongest time to pray is when I've done something that I know I need to pray about. And that's awful to say that, but it's so easy when things are going so nice to, you know, let God sit off on the side and not talk to him as much. We need to be talking to him. As Judy said, you know, it's all the time in our lives.
I think the most time I pray is for my family and friends. I mean, I want to make sure he knows, and he does, and he watches over them and protects them, because they're everywhere now, so. But, I mean, I was in Wisconsin with my son, which surprised me, because there's a church up there. Thank you. And my granddaughter's starting to come back now, and my daughter, she's down south, I'm still praying, trying to push her into it, but it's that and knowing that they're being protected, because I know he's protecting them. He's taking care of them and protecting them, and the friends that I have around, because if it wasn't for them as well, leading me in the right direction, I couldn't be leading others in the right direction. So you've got to have a little bit of help from the ones around you to be able to talk to him and know what you need to be asking for and know what you need to be thanking him for. Because every day I'm grateful and thankful I've got a roof over my head. I've been able to keep my place and everything. And I mean, a lot of people don't think of that much, but it is. It's a hard thing to do.
I always had trouble with the traditional model of prayer. Get on your knees, hold your hands, and spend an hour talking about whatever's on your heart. I could never concentrate long enough to do that, or stay focused, I should say.
It's a great way to fall asleep, though.
It wasn't about going to sleep, it was about my mind going in a zillion different directions and not knowing what. So that obviously, as a pastor, I've led groups in prayer many times, prayed with people, but my personal prayer style is all the time. I don't have the time set aside where I go out. But Jesus went and he was quiet. So I have times when I do that. Just when I'm alone, Kathy's in the other room doing something. I'm by myself. I can focus on that. But I tend to deal with things when they happen. And I just lift the prayer right there. If I see Wendy sends out a prayer concern, I know I'm not going to remember that at the end of the day. So I'll just lift it right there, and then, wow, I'm done. God already knows what I need. So prayer is really more for me than it is for him. So
Yes.
I mean, for those of you who have struggles when you get on your knees or you're spending time in prayer, staying focused, being able to get your list done, there's other ways to do it. Just live prayer. Whenever something happens that needs prayer, just do it.
My youngest sister was really, as a child growing up, just so close to Christ. And one night she told my mom, she goes, Mom, I tell Jesus jokes. And my mom's like, okay, does he laugh? And Shannon goes, well, only if he thinks they're funny, And then I don't even know how we got on the topic one time of praying and how, and I don't even know if Shannon came up with this or heard this, but, there are certain prayers sometimes that they're constant, God be with my family, God help me on my job. And so it was that maybe what we should do is give certain constant prayers or the ones that repeat a code. And so when we're in a hurry, we just go, dear God, code 527, code 821, and so we just name the code instead of actually saying the prayer. I've never done that, but it was something that my sister had suggested. Anybody else have something very special for them during? Was there someone back here? Oh, no. Okay. Yes.
For dinner praying, but we don't really ask for anything specific. It's always thank you for everything you've given us. Although my son will, over the last few months, always says about the coronavirus. Please let us not get sick and everybody in the world. But it helps to teach them not to always ask for stuff every time. Right?
Yeah, there are all kinds of prayers, and that's kind of part of what we want to do in here is, guide you through some of those different kinds of prayers. I think, are there any praises? I can think of two right off the bat, and I can't really give you details But I've had 2 interviews with the company, and I'm meeting with them again this week. And so I'm very close to having a job. And if everything works out the way I'm praying, it will actually be more money than I was making at Kent State, and the situation will be different. I won't have to be there at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. And there's just a whole bunch of stuff where it could turn out to be just an amazing opportunity. And so I'm praising God for that, and I'll share more details once I've kind of signed on the dotted line when I meet with them this week to talk about salary and all of that stuff. But God was with me through 2 interviews, and it has moved very quickly, and I'm really sensing him in this, and we'll, like I said, meet once again Tuesday and finalize things. So I praise God for that. And, well, actually 3 that I know of. Twyla Fano is doing well, and we just want to continue to pray for her as she heals. I think, does she have to have another? Okay, so she had one surgery that went very well, but she's got another one for her pacemaker. Okay. And Ben, I'm lying, I had more than 2, 3, 4. Ben is doing well after his surgery, and it's really good to see Becky here, and just to have her here with us is fantastic. And I think there's some people here today that hadn't come back yet, because Ron, Linda, have you guys been here? Yeah, so it's good to see your faces. Better with the mask, though. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Stand up and yell, talk as loud as you can.
That me and Tim made it to 6 years of marriage today.
Oh my gosh, 6 years. Oh, that's fantastic.
And that is a prank.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's been that long. It doesn't seem like it's been that long. Wow, that's fantastic. Anybody else? Any praises you want to share?
Yeah, Peggy Dees had a surgery and they didn't know where it was going to go, and it's successful. It was a very successful surgery, which helps her in her daily life.
Wonderful. Oh, yes. Janet Ryder, her husband passed away yesterday, and she also had been diagnosed with the coronavirus. And so we need to be praying for her through that, which I'm sure, and just, this is a rough time for anybody to be trying to plan a funeral or hold a funeral. They're just...
Was his with
I don't